Whenever people talk about classic horror, you always hear Dracula, the Mummy, werewolves, that one fish guy, and of course, Frankenstein. Probably one of the most iconic monsters out there, from his green pasty and undead skin to his massive forehead and horrible haircut. Or at least, that's what most people think. Since 1818, which is a, really long time ago, the story of Frankenstein has been told and retold so many times that the public eye has a very different perception on this iconic tale, where every adaptation reinterprets it, tweaks it, or tries to fix it in its own way. And Del Toro's recent take on it is no different, because while it's a sincere and artistic attempt to tell this story, it has one fatal scene that tears the movie apart. And for those of you unfamiliar with this story somehow, Frankenstein is a gothic tragedy about a man who creates life, abandons it, and then spends the rest of his life facing the consequences of his actions, where his creation is rejected by both its maker and the world around it, causing him to lash out towards its maker, creating a cycle of violence that ultimately consumes both of them. And for most of the movie, Del Toro works with this premise with his own stylistic flair. You get to see Victor's side of the story and the monsters as you see where they come from and why they act the way they do, with both of them having tragic lives that change them for the better and worse. Mainly worse. And for a good chunk of it, you're left to sit with their journey and come to your own conclusion. Until...
You are the monster.
And just like that, any ambiguity is gone. There is no room to interpret these characters in a different way or from their perspective, as the movie tells you objectively who the good guy is and who the bad guy is. Now, the problem isn't that Victor is the villain or the monster is the sympathetic underdog. Within a typical narrative, that would be fine. The issue is that the movie acts as if it's following two different perspectives, when in reality, it's only following one, pretending to be morally complex while subtly removing any real complexity from the characters. Because the moment the film locks itself into a black and white framework, it sacrifices what makes these characters compelling. Victor stops becoming a tragic figure capable of growth and regret and instead becomes a one-note cautionary tale, while the monster stops being shaped by the world around him and is protected by the plot, where any action that might be morally questionable is softened, reframed, or quietly ignored. And from that point on, the movie isn't exploring responsibility, complex upbringings, or flawed individuals. It's assigning blame. And once that happens, the story loses its tension because you know how it's going to end. Obviously, Victor is going to accept his creation, and obviously he's going to be forgiven. Why they chose to have a cross-continental pursuit to reach that climax, who knows? I guess it's because the book did it, but it doesn't really make sense here given the context and the changes made. Although, to be honest, once this moment happens, the third act kinda falls apart. And before anybody says, oh, it's supposed to be a cautionary tale, or it's a showcase of generational abuse. Yeah, I know. And the problem isn't its themes, it's how they're executed. Because plenty of movies explore morally opposed characters and responsibility without resulting to black and white storytelling. The difference is that they trust their audience to do the work instead of doing it for them. Take the good, the bad, and the ugly, for example. The movie literally tells you who these characters are in the title, but then spends the entire runtime subtly undermining those labels. Blondie might be the good, but he's a schemer and a backstabber with his self-interest at heart, while someone ugly like Tuco can be charming and sympathetic, even though he's an absolutely awful human being. With the bad, Angel Eyes, not being showcased as a traditional villain, making him far more interesting. The movie gives you archetypes as a subversion, allowing the audience to view them as complex characters and come to their own conclusion on their moral character. Or look at The Prestige, an entire story built on opposing dual perspectives. Each man sees himself as justified and the other as the villain. And that works when they call each other out because it's coming from their perspective, allowing them to call the other the villain or evil because the film never steps in to tell the audience who to root for. That's the difference. When an outsider in the story, especially one positioned as morally sound, like Victor's brother, tells the audience who the real monster is, It tosses complexity out the window, serving as a lecture to the audience and making the rest of the movie feel mundane as there is no moral uncertainty, making Victor's sudden shifting character both underwhelming and unearned as the movie never gave him the space for change, while the monster never has to confront his own capacity for cruelty because the film keeps shielding him from it. Now I know Del Toro loves his monsters. From Hellboy to Shape of Water, he loves to glaze them and make them the innocent, misunderstood outsider. And that bias is very apparent here too, as the movie is terrified in making the monster flawed in any way, where the monster's worst actions are brushed aside as accidents or self-defense or just not called out on. Meanwhile, Victor, who starts out as a complex, morally conflicted character, slowly gets boiled down into an ego-driven, emotionally cold, borderline irredeemable caricature. So by the time the movie reaches its climax, the groundwork for that closure and forgiveness has been undercut due to the movie choosing certainty over ambiguity, preventing both sides of the story from being equally flawed yet understanding of each other, which kinda dies into a personal frustration of mine, which is the conversation around this movie, aka people acting as if they've read the book, where the monster has always been this kind, innocent soul that just wanted to live his life. Well, Victor is the real monster, and that's fact. But clearly, you're just saying that because you watched the movie, where their dynamic is painted as a black and white scenario. Because Del Toro's movie and the original novel by Mary Shelley are vastly different stories. Yes, the movie follows the same basic plot beats, but it makes drastic changes to the characters to cover its message on fatherhood and creating a more hopeful ending. Because very rarely do I see these people mention how the monster murdered a 7-year-old, or that he wanted a companion not out of love, but to join him in his suffering, or the fact he became the very monster people thought he was. Both sides are complex, where they both are sympathetic yet deeply flawed, and the book never hands you that moral verdict, allowing you to sit with these characters and see how both of them spiral into vengeance and hatred. Del Toro's film is his interpretation of that story, not a one-on-one, and that's completely fine. Just don't act as if it's the definitive take on the story. I'd still recommend the movie and say that people should watch it, just please also read the book because y'all fake fans are obvious. Now, I still like Del Toro's Frankenstein, and I respect the care and intention put behind it, so much so that I wish it was in theaters rather than being dropped on Netflix. But the story has never been about one side being right, it's about understanding the perspectives of both sides, and watching flawed people be flawed. Sometimes they spiral into obsession and hatred, but other times they can find redemption and forgiveness. To be flawed is to be human, and by denying that complexity, it prevents the audience from reveling in it. Because when the space for perspective disappears, so does the tragedy that makes the story worth telling. If you made it this far, please like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the kind of content I'm making. This is Balthazar, signing off.